Good evening, and welcome to Community Social Justice Atlanta. I am your host for this evening, Minister Eva McMillan, and I am so excited about this conversation that we're going to have on this evening. If you would go ahead and share this page so that others will be able to follow us and join in. And if you have a question, if you would just post it in the chat, we'll make sure that we try and get to it. But we want you to go ahead and share this. Again, this is Community Social Justice Atlanta. If you've been following us, you know that we are about informing the community so that we believe that if you know more, you are able to do more. So I want to thank you for those of you that are joining. Please share this, call up a friend, a neighbor, a family member, and invite them to join in on this conversation. We have some exciting shows that are coming up in the near future we also want to let you know about. Next on Saturday, April 24th, we're going to be talking about being able to become a homeowner. Tonight, we're going to be talking about homeless to home ownership. And then on Saturday, the 24th, we are actually going to have a virtual workshop to show you how you can become a homeowner. We'll have lenders, we'll have people who are in real estate. The show will be about 2 hours long, so mark your calendar for Saturday, April the 24th at 10 a.m. But tonight, our show is going to be on homelessness to home ownership. Again, my name is Minister Eva McMillan, and this is Community Social Justice Atlanta. Community Social Justice Atlanta actually started during the pandemic, June of last year. So we're coming up on 1 year's anniversary. And if you've been following us, you know that what we believe in is that we want to take you from awareness to action. Awareness to action. And so that is what we're hoping that you would get out of this conversation tonight. Perhaps you would take some type of initiative to do what needs to be done to help bring an end to homelessness, to encourage someone to overcome some of the struggles that they have with homelessness. So we want to encourage you tonight to share this page. Get involved in community, get involved with your neighbors, encourage other people to become involved, become active in the different things that are going on within your community. We are so excited about our future and what the future brings, and we're hoping that others will come along as well. I want to tell you about some of the things that we've already done. If you've been following us, you know that we've dealt with domestic violence. We've dealt with the state of our schools during the pandemic. We've dealt with trauma from domestic violence. We've dealt with a mirage of different conversations, but it all goes back to community and how it affects our community. We've also had a lot of voter registration initiatives that we talked about, and we also talked about voter suppression. And so tonight, I want you to get ready to join in on the conversation. Perhaps you know someone who's homeless and you want to get this information so that you can take back to them. So let's get started. Homelessness to home ownership. Tonight, our first guest is a young lady that's been with us for the first time. And if you would, I would like for you to welcome Kenesha Smith. Hi, Kenesha.
Hello.
Welcome. Would you just take about 60 seconds and tell us who you are and what you do?
Okay, sure. My name is Kenesha Smith, and I am a school social worker in Clayton County Public Schools. And as a school social worker, I seek to eliminate barriers to the academic performance of students. So that homelessness is a part of that, food insecurity, and many other barriers that students are challenged with. Pretty much, I, as a school social worker, address.
Again, thank you for deciding to be a part of this conversation tonight.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you. Our next guest is no stranger to community social justice, and she's no stranger to our community. Welcome, President of the DeKalb County NAACP, President Teresa Hardy. Hello, Teresa.
Good evening. Hi, everyone. Glad to be back. My name is Teresa Hardy, and I'm the president of NAACP DeKalb. And right now, we're fighting to make sure that your voting rights are still intact by the time we have our next election. But I am here to educate, equip, and empower our community around policies, around homelessness and home ownership. So that will be my little task tonight.
Thank you again so much for always being a part of Community Social Justice Atlanta. Our next guest, also new to our platform, Miss Nicole McDowell. Hello, Nicole.
Hello and good evening. My name is Nicole McDowell. I'm the Director of Family Services for Henry County Schools. I want to thank you for this opportunity to be a part of the forum. Ms. Smith has stated the programs that are provided as through the McKinney-Vento, which is a federal act mandated by the government that we have to provide services for our families and our students that experience homelessness. So that program, like Ms. Smith stated before, we ensure that we're removing barriers for students to enroll in school, support them to make sure that they can attend school through transportation and the necessities that they need for their day-to-day living. Again, thank you, and it's an honor to be a part of this panel.
Well, thank you so much for saying yes and becoming a part of this conversation. Would you please welcome tonight Mr. Charles Brooks. Hello, Charles.
Hey, good evening. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Phenomenal. My name is Charles Brooks. I'm the Solicitor General of the State Court of Clayton County. I am truly vested in this conversation because there are a lot of in-need families in my community, and I've personally attempted to assist in ways that people might not expect of the courts, and so. As we endeavor to have this conversation, I look forward to the opinions and the views of such dynamic guests as well.
Thank you again so much for taking time out of your schedule to be a part of this conversation. And last but certainly not least, let's see, we have representatives from Henry County, Clayton County, and now we have from the county of DeKalb. Would you welcome Commissioner Larry Johnson?
Hey, how are you doing, leader? Good to be here, Minister. And I'm here, County Commissioner Larry Johnson. I've been in office since 2002 and just very excited about this topic tonight because over 10,000 people every day in Georgia experience some type of homelessness. And so it's very timely topic, and I'm hoping I can add something to the conversation.
Well, thank you again to each of you. So let's get this conversation started. I'm going to start with you, Ms. Smith. What is the face of homelessness?
The face of homelessness, I believe, is something that many of us may not expect. Homelessness can be individuals that are residing, of course, in shelters, hotels, motels, abandoned buildings, underneath bridgeways and underpasses, and many other areas that are just unsheltered around the city of Atlanta and other parts of Georgia. As far as homelessness and the face, I think it looks like many different things. We have individuals that suffer from mental illness. We have individuals that have been incarcerated. We have individuals that suffer from physical illness and many other things that cause homelessness.
Thank you. I'm going to address this next question because, Nicole, you said something about the mandate for the schools. And we know, based on information to statistics as such, that homelessness really has a big impact on the children who are in school. Can you talk a little about some of the impact that homelessness has on our children who are homeless?
Well, two of the biggest impacts that it has on our children who are homeless is one, it affects the children emotionally and behaviorally. You know, children have separation anxiety. Oftentimes, some children are separated from their families due to homelessness. In addition to their academic performance, it affects them. I'm sure you all know, if you're worried about a place that you're going to have to go to sleep at night and you don't know what you're going to eat or sleep, how can you really focus on academics or teaching and learning? So children who are in a homeless situation, oftentimes, like I stated before, experience emotional and behavioral difficulties, as well as it affects them socially and their social emotional progress.
I can't begin to imagine, what some of these children have gone through, the hardship that it has on an adult. Just to have that to affect a child, it would be so traumatic. And my heart goes out to that. Ms. Hardy, tell me what do you foresee is one of the major things with homelessness that we in our community, how are we faced with it more than other communities? What's happening?
I think I was on mute. I think a lot of things is happening. One of the key things, thank you, Nicole and Kanisha, for bringing out some of the stats and some of the things that we list as homelessness. But the key things we need to remember is if there's policies in place that causes people to be homeless as well. Just there's no homes available that will be affordable to anyone at that rate. So we have a gap in our so even if people are to get a job, they need like 3, 4, 5 jobs to actually be able to pay the rent in an apartment or even in a hotel. So one of the things I think you guys were even mentioning too is the fact that homelessness doesn't mean a person doesn't have a place to stay. It means that people don't have something to call their own. And one of the key things that we want to do is make sure that we get people on the policies as well as the resources that are available to educate you, to be able to empower you to actually get to home ownership. And so that is one of the key things that I want us to be reminded, that some people just to have a home. And Commissioner Johnson works on affordable in our community, trying to make sure that we keep that. But it's a real problem when we think about it from a legislative perspective, that our wealth is not even in the jobs that's being created for us. So we have a lot of work to do. And I look forward to working with each and every one of you to make sure that we close the gap on homelessness as well as the wealth gap as well.
Mr. Brooks, can you comment on what Teresa just said about the wealth gap has caused a lot of this or has contributed to some of the home?
Absolutely. The most trusted way to wealth in America has been through home ownership. And if you look at the legacy of discrimination, certain federal loans were not excluded African Americans. And so if you really want to get to the nuts of bolts of wealth in America and inequality, look to the legacy of home ownership. If you person was able to get a federal loan at a low interest rate in the 1940s after World War II and paid that home off. That home appreciated with equity over the years and passed that down to their descendants. That home now today is probably worth $300,000, and that's 100% equity. Versus the African American family who was not able to obtain the same federal loan. We are starting from not a level playing field. There's a good book called The Color of Law that I would encourage people to read that talks about that very dynamic in the history of home ownership and segregation by American policy.
I have something that I would like to add as it relates to what Ms. Hardy was saying about having to work several jobs to be able to afford housing. So within the communities that I work, I have parents that are constantly working 2-3 jobs in order to support themselves and their students. Let's say you have 2 or 3 children and you have to work. Let's say if you're working at McDonald's or if you're working at Burger King or Home Depot, and there are minimum wage jobs and you have children that you have to feed, you have, of course, bills and utilities to pay. It puts a lot of our families at a disadvantage because they are unable to support their families wholeheartedly and they're having to work multiple jobs or even the extended stays. Some of our families have faced eviction. They've fallen on hard times and they have been evicted from their homes or their apartments. And of course, that goes on your record, which makes it hard for you to find housing in other areas, which is what causes a lot of our families to end up in an extended stay or a hotel or a motel.
And also, if I can add to that, thank you, Ms. Smith, for bringing up that point. The median average for rent in Henry County is $1,000. And so if you think about minimum wage, a parent working 2 or 3 jobs, now that's just the rent. You also have to take into consideration, you have utilities in regards to, there's no public transportation. So there's transportation costs, car insurance, gas, things like that, as well as groceries and taking care of your children. So affordable housing is definitely a barrier for the majority of our families in regards to them sustaining stable housing.
So Commissioner Johnson, these ladies and Mr. Brooks brought up a very important conversation about the wealth gap and also having to work multiple jobs just to keep a roof over your head. What do you see in DeKalb County, and how are we in DeKalb County planning on or doing anything to combat some of this?
Well, this is a multi-pronged approach that has to happen. For county to be proactive, for schools to be proactive, we receive funds from the federal government, and we have to make sure the federal guidelines are in place and how we move. We're about to receive, the just passed, of course, the Relief Act was $1.9 trillion. In May of this year, those checks will start going to counties and school systems that help to impact homelessness and work on with counties home ownership. Then on top of that, President Biden is part of his Build Back Better plan. He just proposed a $1.5 trillion budget. That means this year alone, you should have close to $3.5 trillion coming back into the communities that's going to help us out. And why do I mention that? It's very important, Madam Speaker. I want to just give you some figures because this is going to help us as we talk about home ownership and homelessness. They're proposing 6.3% increase for home ownerships and homelessness in this federal budget that's coming up. President Biden proposed $3.5 billion for homeless assistance. That's a $500 million increase from last year. Section 8 vouchers, 3.4 billion in Section 8 vouchers were proposed. He's proposing $4.6 billion over what was proposed last year. Then you talk about the home program. This is the program that deals with helping folks find a home. That's going to be $1.9 billion. He's proposing $500 million increase in this budget. I'm talking about the fiscal year, October 1st. That's on top of the 1.9 trillion that will be coming to counties in May of this year. So we have to make sure our public policies are instituted in such a way that you can impact. This is the largest program we're going to ever see in our lifetime that's going to impact families. And we have to use this funding wisely. You have to use it in a sense of bringing people out of poverty. It's all about, like our president said, and many of our speakers, if you can't raise folks out of poverty, all you're doing is putting some money or water in a bucket with a hole in it. And so that's why it's going to take not only dealing with homelessness and families, you're going to have to team it up with financial literacy. That's what the county provides. You're going to work on transportation. The county is working with our transportation departments. You're going to have to work with healthcare. All the things that impact families coming out of a pandemic is going to be crucial. Mental health. So it's going to be more than just housing that we have to talk. Housing encompasses all of these facets that has to be impacted by public policy. And I just want to keep it in front of people. We're going to get $1.9 trillion in May, and then another $1.5 trillion starting October 1st. If we don't do anything with this, everybody on this panel, we're going to miss a large opportunity.
How the distribution? How is that determined?
It's determined by your population. If you're over 200,000, you're going to get a direct check. Your county or your school system will get a direct check from the federal government. And so you will get that sometime in May. If you're under 50,000, you will get yours through the state of Georgia. So these funds will come based on your population. They already earmarked. You can ask our president. She's worked hard in terms around eviction assistance. We got $21 million earlier this year around eviction assistance. We had to shut the program down in 1 week. $21 million were gone. Remember, these folks are already behind. Right. And the moratorium has been extended till September 30th. So you're still dealing with a population that may not be able to catch up because a lot of folks lost jobs. The tourism industry, the industries that impact these families, they couldn't get on Zoom and help you get in your seat. They couldn't get on Zoom to help you fix your plate or, help you at the hospital. So they had to go to work, and a lot of them were impacted because their kids were at home. So you had broadband connectivity that was impacted. So all of these programs that are about to come in that impacts counties and schools, that money will flow from May through the end of December and beyond. And so it's going to be very important. We're going to be basically 20% of the population will be lifted out of poverty based on this $1.9 trillion. That's a lot of people that's coming out of poverty.
Are there any measures in place or to assure that those that need it will get it?
Well, the measures is based on your income.
Okay.
It's based on your income. It's based on HUD. Remember, all these things are based on HUD guidelines, and your county and your school know these guidelines are already in place. The good thing about the funding that's coming down from the 1.9 trillion, we're going to have more flexibility in doing the work of the county, and because we were very specific when they gave the last relief package. But this one will give us a little bit more flexibility. So we'll be focused on food insecurity, rent assistance, broadband, interconnectivity. You probably be doing some home ownership things, but the goal is, remember, to move to home ownership. That's a middle class proposition.
Right.
So we also have to look out. Homelessness don't look like the same as it look. Most people just see people on the street and you think, oh, that's homeless. We got a lot of middle class families that are hurting. Right. So I'm hoping that when we do this next round of funding, you got to help people with student loans. I don't know about y'all. We had over $200,000 worth of student loans, and and so a lot of those families. So it's got to be making sure that you have that injection of folks who are not only low income, but you got to make sure you help the middle income as well. Otherwise, you're going to help some folks get out and get into a house, but the people in the house are going to lose the house. So you're going to be back in the same cycle again. So you cannot, you got to have it so you can stabilize both of those key populations. And sometimes the middle class, either the rich get it or the poor, but the middle class, they be locked out. And then we're saying, okay, what's happening?
And to your point, Commissioner Johnson, you brought up a point of what the face of homelessness, what that looks like. Some may not realize homelessness is also when families double up in a home.
Yes, right.
Because they don't have a stable living environment. So you can have a family that is living with another family that's in that middle class or teetering to stay in that middle class status, and maybe one paycheck away from losing that status. Then you're left with two families that are then homeless.
That's right. That's right.
So it sounds like we need to redefine what homelessness is.
I wanted to add to that. Homelessness right now, if you look it up or in literature, research says that homelessness is the lack of fixed residence, a lack of a fixed shelter, a residence that you can call your own. So as Ms. McDowell mentioned, we have families that are living with other family members, friends, family friends. We have individuals living in hotels, motels, shelters. We have individuals that are unsheltered. So it's basically the lack of a fixed residence, a permanent shelter, someplace that's yours that you can call your own for a long period of time.
It's like the old days. You got your uncle, you stay with Big Mama and your mother. They really were homeless, but we didn't call it that. But that's happening more often.
But also too, if you look at the statistics for Georgia, in the definition of homelessness, the highest population are families that are doubled up, and that's at 71%. So that's the highest population of homelessness in the state of Georgia.
Now, did this occur before the pandemic, or is this as a result of the pandemic?
This is the latest data that I have is from 2018, 2019. So I would suspect that those numbers are going to be much higher when we receive updated information.
Right. You haven't even got the census numbers. They won't come out until October, when you're really going to find out new population figures and where people are. COVID has just taken the scab off, because now you've seen a lot of things exposed. I mean, they'll tell you how many people in the schools have to come up for a free lunch for the week, or get food distributions, and folks that you never saw before who need help. And so that's just really have had an impact, and not counting the people who have had COVID, who lost their job, and now they have medical problems that never will probably be able to work again.
Wow. And I'd like to also share, when COVID first had an impact on us in the school district, one of the first things that we did is we wanted to make sure that all of our children had meals. And so we set up meal distribution sites at 5 of our schools. And I actually had volunteered to go out to, assist with handing meals out. And you see individuals driving up in really nice vehicles. But the reality is, like I stated before, a lot of these families may be one paycheck away from losing their resources. And when we talk about homelessness, you never know a person's situation based upon the optics that you see. And people are, as we know, people are struggling.
If I may add to that as well, in Clayton, we've also done food pantries. Prior to the pandemic, we had food pantries. And as a school social worker, I would do 3 food pantries a month. So we were serving about 150 average. But as a result of the pandemic, literally every Friday since March of last year, we've been doing food pantries in our district. We have tripled those numbers. So 250, one distribution site serves 782 families within a 2-hour time frame. And actually that area is located in Forest Park, which is where our shelter is located, Calvary Refuge off Thurman Road in Forest Park. So the need is high. Prior to the pandemic, the need was high. But as a result of the pandemic, school systems, community stakeholders, we've had to meet the needs of the community. We've had to come up with other options to be able to support our community, whether that be rental assistance, food insecurity. We've had to pretty much meet the challenge that the pandemic has offered us.
And let me add to that, because right now, if you try to buy a house in DeKalb, Henry, or Clayton, you may have 10 offers on one house. So the price for housing has gone up tremendously. So when you add that in, then you add in the bias that African Americans or people face to get a loan for a house.
Mhm.
It's a whole, and that's why I'm glad you're dealing with this topic. This is more than a notion. I mean, even to get from the banking industry to get a house, I mean, it's just almost triple. I mean, you can't have a house on the market. It is so hot in the metro region right now. You really probably have to go almost 200 miles out to have an affordable house, period. And having a down payment and having your credit score that's been hit by the pandemic. It's a whole lot that goes into moving from the homelessness to the home ownership that we got to get some type of headway in between. And so I know our president, Teresa Hardy, she's working hard and making it happen. But you got a lot of factors that go into this, that the scab has been removed because of the pandemic that we have to address.
If you can see that communities, I mean, historically, they've always shifted whenever there's been a disaster, that it will go from a person, of color community to other communities. And so if we see homelessness happening now, but then there's such a need for people, the housing prices are rising, somebody is buying up this property.
Oh yeah, people.
And it's not our people.
Mm-mm,
And
no.
so, Mr. Brooks, you said something earlier. You said that you are fighting some of this homelessness. You're doing some things in the courts. What did you mean by that?
Well, a lot of times people don't realize that the way our criminal justice system is set up, in some ways, homelessness is penalized through criminal means. And what I mean by that is, if you're a homeless individual and you have no place to go, so you go to the store and you're standing in front of the store because you have nowhere else to go, you might get arrested for loitering improudly, okay, or criminal trespass. And when you're arrested, then you placed into the criminal justice system, at which point the case comes to my office and we have to make a determination. Is this a criminal act or is this homelessness? If it's homelessness, homelessness is not illegal. What's the criminal act? And so what I've trained my prosecutors to do is that we evaluate each case to see if it's a case in which we intend to prosecute, or is it a case in which we can try to get some wraparound services to that individual. And how do we go about doing that? We would work with the defense counsel and ask them to seek out services in our community and in the metro area to assist this person to some sense of stability. Homelessness, as Commissioner Johnson and all the panelists have said, it's a layered type of thing, and it's a number of different things that have to happen to get people to stability. But how do you eat an elephant? You eat it one bite at a time. And so for the homeless community or the homeless population, we need to work on getting our unsheltered population to sheltered populations. And then we need to work getting our sheltered populations to individual shelters. And what I mean by that is families that are living two in a house, three in a house, each family living in their own household. I mean, and even if you want to take it a step further, in some definitions, they consider a car a type of shelter.
Wow.
But is it really? And so we really need to just focus in a little bit at a time on each nuance of the multiple layers of homelessness. Yeah,
I'm glad that you said that, because I was reading, and I believe it was the GPC or the AJC, one of those, and it said that people who were staying in extended stays, they do not classify them as being homeless. And I always thought that was, if you were in an extended stay, that you were classified as homeless. But they said, no, it's not. They're not classified because they're not outside. And I just thought, how absurd is that? But, the different things are now being classified that way. This is Community Social Justice Atlanta. If you're just tuning in, we are having a very good conversation about homelessness to home ownership. Our panel tonight has just a a vast knowledge of information. Each one of them brings to the table knowledge and also some information that you can use in the future. We have Kenesha Smith, we have Teresa Hardy, we have Commissioner Larry Johnson, we have Solicitor General Charles Brooks, and we also have Ms. Nicole McDowell. If you have a question, please put it in our chat. We will try to get to it. This is a conversation that needs to be had, and we are so excited about these people being here tonight. I thought it was very, you brought up, Commissioner Johnson, how that within a week's time, when DeKalb County announced that $21 million from the federal government to prevent evictions, that when in a week's time, it was gone.
Yes. Oh, yeah. It was very eye opening, but not surprising. I mean, I had families that I've had families that was evicted out of the extended stay hotel, and they've tried to find housing, and they wasn't supposed to get evicted. So we finally won the case. I had Atlanta Legal Aid step in, and they finally won the case against this extended stay that they should have let them stay there. But see, what you're talking about is a larger conversation that I don't think a lot of us want to have, because we assume that affordable housing is a negative, is a blight, and we don't want enough, and we don't have enough affordable housing. That's why a lot of your families are living in extended stay hotel. The money was cut in the federal government in the 80s, and they just kept cutting the money. And so then they tore down the projects and they did the voucher system, but they didn't give enough vouchers. And so now you got this group that President Hardy talked about, that wages are not enough for them to live in an apartment. And so they may have to have 2 or 3 people in one place. And then you get an area that's over congested with one type of income. And I say that's a larger conversation that we need to have in all of our areas, because people want senior housing. They'll let senior housing come in. They like that affordable housing. But anything dealing with families and children, there's a stigma still attached, and we don't want to deal with it in our community, that we need to have affordable housing. And as soon as you bring up that issue, and I'm a county commissioner, and I know folks will try to run you out. They don't want to talk about that. And so you have to have a true conversation, because everybody didn't grow up in a house. I didn't, but we had to start somewhere. But somehow, some ways, when people get them big houses, they don't want them type of apartments around there. You already got a stigma, and our school system can tell you they know a lot of folks stigmatize people that come from the apartment kids versus the home kids. And teachers do it. A lot of people look at those kids differently than they look at people who live in the house. And so that's a bigger and larger conversation. If we want to move folks from homelessness to home ownership, you got to get them stabilized. And it's going to require some type of affordable housing to do it. And I call ours workforce housing to get around the stigma, because I say we bring in teachers, firefighters, police officers, but we got to have that larger conversation if you want to deal with. I mean, you can build a shelter. Shelters are only temporary. They Band-Aids. You can put people in a shelter, but that does not solve the issue around homelessness. It just gets them off the street, and like our solicitor said, not in front of the store or the post office, but you hadn't solved the problem.
Wow. So what's some of the stigmas, Kenesha? What's some of the stigmas that people who are facing homelessness that they have to deal with that are not necessarily true?
So from my experiences, some of the stigmas that a lot of our families face, or just homeless individuals in general, mismanagement of money. Like, oh, you didn't handle your money appropriately, so you're homeless. What about the families that didn't have the appropriate homeowners insurance and they had a fire? We have a lot of fires. We experience a lot of home fires in our area. What about those families? Or they're not doing enough to help themselves. That's a big stigma that we have. We have families that are working 2 or 3 jobs. As Commissioner Johnson mentioned, we have families that are doubled up, some by choice, some not by choice, to be able to afford the places that they're residing. And a lot of our apartment complexes are some of the most transient areas in our communities, because we have families moving from rental special to rental special to rental special based on what they can afford. So if I'm on Garden Walk and then I'm going to Riverdale Road and then I'm going to Godby Road, I'm chasing a special. So a lot of our families are faced with that stigma, and sometimes they don't want to come forth because they feel like they'll be stigmatized. Hey, I'm homeless. I was facing eviction. I wasn't able to afford it. As Commissioner Johnson mentioned, a lot of our families work tourism jobs or retail jobs or jobs that were no longer needed as a result of the pandemic. And where does that leave our families? Everyone wasn't able to receive unemployment. So it's not necessarily a case of I'm not working, I'm a stranger to hard work. It's, hey, this is my situation. I have a family of 5. I make $11 an hour and I work 30 hours a week and my rent is $1,100. That's not including utilities. So I believe that is a big part of the stigma, that our families aren't hardworking or they're not pulling their weight, but they're indeed trying. But it seems to be a cycle. Chronic homelessness. I have families with their grandparents, their parents. My mom was homeless. She lives with me. I'm homeless. Literally, I have families that have their whole families in their apartments because it's a chronic homeless cycle.
So, and if I can add to that as well, another stigma I would say is the perception that parents don't care, and also judging the parents based upon what is termed as parental engagement. And depending on your situation, if you're able to get your children to school, or now children are working remotely from home, a parent is able to get their child logged onto that learning platform. You have to consider their situation and not judge parental engagement based upon what some may see as the norm. If I'm able to get my child to school, I'm an engaged parent. If I'm able to get my child logged onto that platform to learn, I'm engaging in my child's learning, and I'm doing the best that I know how to do based upon the means that I have.
I wanted to add to that briefly.
A re-education of the population to let people know, because when we know better, we do better. So just this misinformed, and a lot of this comes through media, that the labeling comes through how media portrays people. And so I want to ask someone, so what can we do to change the narrative?
I can start by saying, I think we have to get to the root of the problem. A lot of, as a school social worker, that's, essentially what we do. What's the concern? What's the challenge? And what's the root of that challenge? But I think that homelessness is not necessarily universal. It's not one reason why everyone is homeless. We have to get to the root of the problem and find out what are the common factors. Is it job insecurity? Is it affordable housing? What is the root in this specific area? And DeKalb may be different. Families may be facing homelessness for a different reason than Clayton or Henry County. So I think that we need to conduct a needs assessment on our families and say, hey, what's the root of the homelessness? A lot of families are struggling with chronic homelessness. How can we alleviate this concern? Like literally, as a school social worker, I sit down with families all the time. I did a budget with a parent one time because she couldn't conceptualize not getting her nails done. It may sound funny. However, she literally couldn't conceptualize not getting her nails done. Hey, you're on the verge of eviction. We have to cut some of these budget line items out. We're not going to be able to get our hair done. We're not going to be able to get our nails done. But if you were never taught that, how can I expect you to be able to perform on this level? So I think that we need to find out what the root of the problem is. Is it financial literacy? Is it, job insecurity? Is it food insecurity, affordable housing, according to the area?
According to the area.
And I agree with Ms. Smith. Definitely doing a root cause analysis is definitely key to it. But as Commissioner Johnson stated before, I think it's a conversation that goes far beyond this panel. If you look at the data with homelessness, is disproportionate when it comes to African Americans. And if you look at nationwide, when we deal with issues, is disproportionate when it comes to the lack of services being provided. So like I stated before, what Commissioner Johnson has stated is a conversation that needs to be had outside of this when it comes to policy, when it comes to race and ethnicity. But I do definitely agree with root cause analysis, and it goes back to education, early education, educating our children early on. My grandparents from Mississippi, the one thing they said is make sure you got an insurance policy to bury someone. Never talked about investing in the stock market, never talked about a checkbook, never talked about, they talked about a savings account, but never really got into the benefits of why you need a savings account and interest and things like that. So I would say if we started educating our children early on financial literacy, that's one way we can help combat, homelessness.
And
That is so true. That is so true. The beginning of the conversation has to be started, I believe, with the children. I used to teach financial in school, and depending on the school, I had to change the lesson. In our schools, in people of color schools, I had to introduce saving, how to cut out some of these. You don't have to go buy Starbucks. You don't have to buy the $100 tennis shoes. But when I got to the other side of town, they already knew about investing. So we had to, I had to change the narrative because they basically was already there of what I was trying to get our children to understand. And so I agree, education, but it's not taught at the school level anymore. And they don't do that unless you are in a private school. So, we got to start somewhere, maybe within the community. Teresa, what do you propose that some of the ideas that we could come up with to help dwarf this homeless population and get re-educated?
Yeah. So first of all, we're gonna have to do it block by block. And we cannot depend on other people to do it for us. We have to do this for ourselves. And this is really near and dear to me. I think Pastor had already mentioned this, but I have a concern as it relates to the policy and the rules and the regulations that we already have in place. They don't fit most of our scenarios. As you know, we got several scenarios to look at, but it does not fit our scenarios. And I give you an example. Federal guidelines is going to knock a lot of our people out because one, somebody's not going to be there had a job, right? The other, when you talk about income, no one's probably had income for a whole year because of COVID. So you're not going to get the home ownership in that manner. Some people have criminal activity, which is still on the list. If you got criminal backgrounds, you cannot get a home. And then on top of that, if it's your son, your child, you cannot get a home for them. So some of this has got to be taken a different way. And I am looking to the churches to actually do what they were called to do as it relates to ministry and taking care of our people. I think this is a call to action for our churches to literally come together and go back to what Malachi 3 said, which is to this money aside for the storehouse so we be able to use it when we need to. So we need to figure out a way to come back. If it's financial literacy, financial education, we need to do that every day anyway. And that talk has to happen in the morning when we get up, at lunch, and at dinner. It's something consistently that we're going to have to do as a community. These are not things that we don't know. These are things that we do know. And we don't need to wait on somebody to tell us to do something that we already know should be done in our community. The policies and procedures that are in place, and I found this out because of what we went through with receiving the funds, don't fit everybody that's in our community. And that's going to be a problem when we even do the census. When that comes out in October, we're going to have a problem. We're trying to identify who really can fit the criteria for receiving the funds or the benefits or the services. So we just really got to figure out how we can do this literally blah, 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 with the support of our churches, communities, businesses, schools, everybody working together as one, not identifying anybody that's different. That the thing about diversity means that we all need to come together. I really believe that unifying ourselves together to this cause to make sure that no one is homeless or the mindset of homelessness. I'm gonna stop right there because I can go on and on.
Mr. Brooks, what do you propose for your area to help with this? What are some of the things that you're trying to put forth?
From a court perspective, I think the courts have to be mindful not to penalize, not to make homelessness illegal. Um, Homelessness is an economic status, but it's not a criminal matter.
Right.
And so, whereas folks are arrested for, say, for example, loitering or prowling, or something to that effect, something a nuisance offense, and that's what I'll call it. It's a nuisance offense. Um, Rather than criminalize that behavior, let's take this opportunity to provide services. I think there's a larger conversation that's happening with criminal justice across the nation right now. But a part of that conversation needs to be a conversation about how we treat the least of us, and that's the homeless population. In my community, Clayton County is the home of the airport. It's Atlanta Airport, but it's in Clayton County. And so a large majority of the homeless population that I see in the criminal justice system happens to come from the airport. Because what do people do? They get on the trains, they get on the buses, they go to the airport, and then because Atlanta is an international city, we don't want to showcase our homeless population to our visitors, to our travelers, right? So they get arrested and they end up in the Clayton County jail. And so I have to evaluate whether or not that's a case that we should prosecute. And in most cases, it's not.
Well, let me ask you this, because I remember, from a historical standpoint, that some of those laws were in place in order that they could get free labor. Back when slavery ended, that Black men were rounded up if they stood on the corner, just standing there. They were charged and then put on farms and chain gangs so that free labor could be done. So, but now, the criminal justice system is so profitable that, it's going to take major overhaul. And again, you're right, it does affect so many areas, and it deals with, and the homelessness, people are a major part of that. So getting that part of it rectified is going to be huge. So let me ask each of you. We're going to start with Kenesha, and then we're going to go down. Call each of you. If you had to put something in place right now, the number one thing that you would like to see put in place to help alleviate homelessness, what would it be?
I'll start by saying affordable housing that is actually affordable. I have noticed the gentrification of the city. So if you're looking at Metro Atlanta, downtown, you see Mercedes-Benz Stadium, you see other infrastructures that are being built, and you also see a decrease in the homeless population. They're putting like barricades underneath the bridges now. Where are those homeless individuals to go? So they go to the South Side. They're in Clayton, they're in Henry, they're in DeKalb, which I believe increases our homeless population in those areas. So let's get affordable housing. Shelter, as someone mentioned earlier, is a temporary fix. It's a Band-Aid. Let's get affordable housing. Let's focus on teaching families how to maintain and secure housing so we can prevent the cycle of homelessness for families.
Ms. McDowell, I'll go to you.
I was going to say the same thing. It's the affordable housing. The Section 8 housing and affordable housing is limited in Henry County. So I would definitely say affordable housing. But in addition to that, housing where there's access and opportunities, access to transportation and opportunities to jobs. So where individuals or and I would say residents they're living at, are those jobs in close proximity to where the housing is, and ensuring that there's a transportation system in place so that our residents can get to those jobs.
So is the ultimate goal, though, if you're talking about, affordable housing, are we talking about for ownership, or are we talking about just rentals, or what do you mean by affordable housing?
Well, there has to be a starting point. So if you start with renting and you provide resources and supports, and that big piece that we talked about is educating financial education, as well as home ownership education. That would be a start to get people prepared to go into home ownership. And I don't know this to be for sure, but I would just imagine if you just drop people into that situation, you're going to have people that it's going to be trial and error trying to figure things out. And that jeopardizes their home ownership long term.
Right. Yes.
I agree with Ms. McDowell. We have to start somewhere. So I wouldn't want to just put you in a home and you're not able to steward the apartment that you have first, or you don't have the skills that you need to be able to have an apartment and to be able to pay the bills and utilities. And I also wanted to emphasize job security. As a social worker, I look at parents and I'm like, hey, I've noticed that you've had, a certain amount of fast food jobs, or you've had a certain amount of custodial positions. Let's look at getting you into a more permanent position. So instead of transitioning from Wendy's, McDonald's, churches, let's look at the food. Let's look at food locations so you can have insurance, or you can have benefits, or you can have other things that will help you sustain. So I think that's the major thing that we need to look at, how we can help families sustain housing, sustain job security, to be able to afford home ownership, apartments, and things of that nature. And it takes a community collaborative effort. The individuals on this call, we all have this investment and passion within homelessness, but it takes a community collaborative effort to be able to eliminate and alleviate some of these concerns in our separate districts and counties.
Mr. Brooks.
I don't think you can, and there's one thing that I can say. I think it has to be multifaceted and multi-pronged. And for me, jobs is important, and not just any jobs, but well-paying jobs. You can't have any type of ownership, or you can't even rent without money.
Mm-hmm.
And so, I mean, there's a fight right now on the national stage to just get the minimum wage to a working wage at $15 an hour. And quite frankly, that's still probably not enough if you look at the metro area as a microcosm of the rate of inflation. And so for me, it will have to be jobs. It has to be national policy. There are some policy changes that would have to happen about how people qualify for homes, what the requirements are. And then there will have to be regulatory changes with the banks.
Mm-hmm.
The banks they're private industry, and so they have rules among themselves how they view certain neighborhoods, what neighborhoods they're willing to give certain types of loans. The reason that the housing crisis or the economy failed in 2008 was because subprime loans, right?
Yeah.
That was the result of private industry being predators. And that was because we had a weak regulatory apparatus. I think it has to be jobs, it has to be regulation, and it has to be policy, federal policy.
President Hardy, what would you like to see? What's the one thing you'd like to see?
Yeah, so here's my little 2 cents. Yeah, so so first of all, yeah, if we do $15 an hour, it's not going to be enough that will afford us to have a house that is $900 a month. Do the math, it doesn't. We need to literally get ourselves to a point where people are literally making, and I'm going to say it like this, 50,000 plus. 50,000 plus should afford you a place to stay. And what I'm going to say too is, because of what I see in the rental, being in a rental space is worse than being in homeowners. I would rather put everybody in a home, and then whoever gives me the loan, you do financial education with me every year to make sure that I'm actually staying up on it. Because it doesn't make any sense for us to be paying $1,500 a month for a rental, and then you can get a house for $800 a month. That makes no sense to me. So my thing is, get everybody's salary up to $50,000 or more. Then put everybody in a home, and then you, as the bank owner and the community, do teaching, financial literacy every year, just like goal setting every year, so that you can make sure you stay in your home 30 years. Okay, and that's the only way it's going to happen. Now, I know I'm being optimistic, But you know, this way of going there talking about, you know, paying this and paying this, rental is not the thing. We need some kind of policy that not rent be more than owning a house. That don't make any sense. So that's just my 2 cents, and I'm just gonna leave it like that.
Well, she said it. So it be it. Commissioner Johnson.
Well, I'll just add like this. I've had a chance to visit Orange County, California. Orange County, California is the home of Disney, is it Disneyland, and it's one of the most wealthiest counties in the country. And you know, when I go on tours, they always take me to the nice place. I said, no, let me see the shelter, because it's a rich place. I mean, average home price there is probably $1.1 million. And right across the street from the county building was an old bus depot that they converted into a shelter. And since the weather's so warm, you know, they didn't have to have walls up. They can put curtains up. The lady had a washer and dryer in there. They had room section off. And ironically, the lady who ran it was from Clayton County, Georgia. I said, how do you get way here from California? But they told me about the program they do in Orange County, California. They have a place right downtown for the homeless. Now you go down there into the place. This was just the shelter part I looked at, but they got a place. They move you from the shelter to a place to live. It looks like they condominiums. It don't even look like you know how they make affordable housing look, and you can tell. Mm-hmm. This place was one of the best places you want to live if you were making $100,000 a year. This is how good it was. Then I went to Salt Lake City in Utah, one of the whitest places in America. And they took right downtown in Utah. They don't show this on TV, but they got one of the largest homeless population ever. I said, take me to the shelter. Mm-hmm. They took me to the shelter, and the shelter was 24 hours. I wanted to go to the youth shelter. I didn't want to go to the one because I wanted to go to the one where you had a population that was between 15 and 21. And I wanted to talk to those kids and see what it was. And it showed me, because we forget that population. You think everybody is a mom and pop with some kids. You got a lot of young homeless teens out here just wondering, and where do they go? Because a lot of homeless shelters in Georgia, if a male is over 14 years old, they can't even bring them into the shelter. Wow. So where do you take the whole family? And so, but this is my ideal place. If I was in charge, and I'm gonna give you my, since Teresa's being like she's from want to go to Wonderland, I'm gonna go to Wonderland too. I would assign a coach to every family who's going through the system. Mm-hmm. Because right now you have a case manager for folks, and the teachers, the folks in the school system can tell me, you may have a case manager for somebody in defects. You may have a case manager for somebody on parole. You may have a case man. You may have 5 case managers for one family. You know how much they use up the services in our government? And none of them talk to each other because they're all siloed. I will assign one coach to that whole family to move them from homelessness to apartment to eventually to a house, and and you got to pay these coaches $100,000 plus a year. You can't pay them no $24,000 because they have homeless themselves, right, trying to tell somebody else how to get out of it. You got to treat this job as a status symbol that allow folks who have a degree or who may not have it, but who want to go into this profession. You can't treat this just like a human service job at $30,000 an hour and your benefits barely making it. You got to put some status on it. And their job is just like you would do if you're trying to sign somebody up for some insurance. You try to make their job is to get that. You get a bonus when you move that person to a permanent place to live. And I would pay them a good salary. And that's their whole role would be to get folks out of that situation. And you know how many people would leave poverty and move into that realm if we pay somebody the right salaries, and then their job is to get that person from 0 to 100. They would learn about credit scores. They would know not only just literacy, but if your credit score is jacked up, you got to understand credit scores. Right. I took a financial literacy program to about 5 elementary schools, and we gave them calculators. And what we taught them is working with a bank. I wanted to teach the young people. These were like 3rd graders. I was teaching about credit score. One girl got up at 10 years old. She knew everything about credit scores. I said, girl, she got it. but they didn't teach you about credit scores in college. I mean, I had 15 credit cards because I was broke. I was in poverty coming from Chicago and going to college. I didn't know about no money. So they got, credit cards just given out like pills. But we didn't know about credit scores. But that would be my pie in the sky dream if I could do it. Because remember, homelessness is about drug addiction. It's about poverty. It's about family management.
Mm-hmm.
It's about transportation. This issue is much more complicated than we think. And so most of why they just don't do it? I said most of the folks living in extended stay, they want to work. They working.
Right.
They're doing stuff, but we got to get past the stereotypes, and that's what we have to deal with. So that'd be my ideal situation.
Well, I'm going to put in my application whenever you get that going.
Right. Sign me up. Sign me up.
You see that? You see how many good people I'm going to get? But that's the type of people you need for a position like this. If you really want to impact the system, we just give it to the people, I would say Mr. Brooks, because he got the bow tie on, he got the $100,000 job. But people like us, that's trying to make it, you got to put you got to put money and emphasis. Like I tell early learning education teachers are so important. Why do you just pay them $30,000-$40,000?
Yes.
If children are the future, you got to pay them folks to set the future. But you'll pay them little, and then if they want to make some more, they got to keep moving up the system to get it. Start them off right.
Yeah.
But we won't do that. We say we want to help people. We want them out of this system, but you just give you just enough to make it out. But you don't. You got to. It's like incremental. So you never really get out. It's like once you take a step forward, oh no, now my insurance is going up. Now my money back funny again. Or then once you try to get a house, okay, now I'm trying to save for a house, but I got to live right now too. I can't save and then try to live because my money is funny. I'm not living where I can save 20% of my income. So we got to find ways to alleviate that from people.
Yeah, I agree. And I think we all on this panel agree with that. Our time has come to an end. This has been a very informative conversation, enlightening on so many different issues. If you didn't know what homelessness was, they re-educated us on homelessness. We've got to get out of this mindset that it's them and not us, because we are our brother's keepers and we are all in this together. Many people are just one paycheck away from being homeless sometimes. And so I want to encourage you tonight that, get some information. If you know someone who's struggling with homelessness, who some of these issues, lend a hand, give an encouraging word, find out where they can get help and get them some help, take them to where they need to go, reach out to someone that can help them. This has been Community Social Justice Atlanta. I thank you for joining us tonight. This conversation is not over. We have a lot to do in our community, but we have some people such as on our panel tonight. I wanted to say again, thank you to Ms. Kenesha Smith, Ms. Nicole McDowell, President Teresa Hardy, Solicitor General Charles Brooks, and Commissioner Larry Johnson for taking time out of your schedule. Thank you so much for joining us, and stay tuned next week when we will have a virtual workshop on how to become a homeowner. Good night and God bless each